And we're back. It's episode 8 of Specialness. I am Jeff.
I'm Kim.
And I think where we left off was we were just coming out of all the realizations of our genetic study.
Yes, that, and we had just done a neuropsych eval.
Yes, that's our third one.
Or fifth.
So whatever.
Fourth one.
Right.
That confirmed the intellectual disability.
Yes.
And
the undiagnosed, indiagnosable brain developmental disruption.
Correct.
Okay.
So at that point, he was about 15 and a half or so. And
just 6 months short of getting his driver's license. Right. He didn't get a driver's license.
So this episode's going to be kind of the years 16 to 18.
It's a critical time.
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say these years were hard.
As opposed to the other years?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So were they harder or just as hard or less or just normal hard?
I would say they're harder for several different reasons. Is A, we have puberty going on, and puberty and mental illness and autism don't mix.
No, not
at
well.
all. We had a tremendous amount of medicine changes and increases because his mood for a while had been so much better, but puberty just kind of threw things off. But really, I think what was hard for those years was the mental aspect of these are big milestones in your kid's life.
So you're talking about the mental aspects for us.
For us.
Yeah.
Not for him.
He has an ongoing mental struggle. He's just not very aware of it.
Yeah, he's not aware
right.
of that he's not getting his driver's license and going to college.
In fact,
doing those things.
He did not want to get a driver's license. When he heard that like his cousins that were around his age were getting a driver's license, he was like, I don't want to drive.
No,
that's
what did
the last thing I don't.
Because he wanted to sit in the back and watch.
Well, that's a good story, right? He when we asked him about, we don't want him to feel like he's not we want him to feel as much like a normal teenager as we can, within reason, So when he heard that his cousins, who were a year older than him or around his age, had gotten their driver's license, we just basically said, how do you feel about getting a driver's license? And would you like to get a driver's license? And his response was, I'd like to have a driver's license, but I would really rather have a car that drives itself and has a TV in the back so I can watch movies.
Right.
Which sounded a lot like what we're doing now, just we were driving. So it's clear that, he did not really get excited about.
No.
He didn't even really miss it.
No, and he even kind of joked about, he would say, no, I'd crash because I zone out all the time. And so we kind of laughed. And we both knew, he can't have a driver's license.
We all knew he was never going to have a driver's license, right? But luckily, and we've kind of touched on this, one of the benefits, if you can say that, of his mental condition is that he didn't crave those things, which would have made things a whole lot harder. We know people who have schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. Their children have those things, but they don't have the mental capacity differences, and therefore they do feel like they should have a driver's license or live independently, and that's the one thing we haven't had to worry about. Kaysen
because he
has no interest in being independent.
Yeah, well, he thinks like a 8-year-old.
Right.
He thinks like a child. So. Right. 16 was hard mentally for us just because that was the first really big milestone that we had to sit back and realize he's not going to be able to do those things.
Well, that was that's the whole Facebook thing where that's probably when I started looking at Facebook a little less because I am seeing all of my peers and friends and, all of their kids are getting their driver's license and they're excited and it's a rite of passage. And I wasn't going to happen.
Still doing the same thing we did 10 years prior. He's still wetting the bed every night.
Yes.
He's now using a CPAP. It's just, and his IQ has dropped. So emotionally, that's hard.
It was tough, yeah.
So about the same time, I'd mentioned before that Kaysen was getting sick a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He had tons of sinus infections and antibiotics constantly. And we'd been to the immunologist, and he had done the immune testing, and they were low. So about this time, all of that just really got worse. I mean, antibiotics weren't touching the sinus infections. He was sick all the time. But this time, he started getting skin infections, which was new to us. A couple times, of course, it's a weekend, and we end up at an urgent care or the ER because these infections just kind of popped up. And so we were like, we need to go back to the immunologist and see what's going on. And so they do a blood test. And this time around, Kaysen's, all three of his immune markers were well below normal. So the doctor says he has immune deficiency. And we have no idea why. We don't know if this is part of the 15Q25.2 or if this has resulted in because of the medicine he's taking. Nobody knows. But we need to do something because he's getting sick all the time, and we can't keep giving him antibiotics. So they throw out the word Hizentra, which is an infusion that is used to treat immune deficiency.
Yes.
And I'd never heard of it before.
We had never taken into consideration something that would require an infusion.
No.
And also, when you think of infusions, it's like a one-time thing. Someone has to go in and get a transfusion, a blood transfusion or something. It's not like generally it's something you have to do regularly. With Hizentra and an immunotherapy, it's weekly.
For the rest of his life.
That's certainly what we have been told.
Right.
Yeah.
So the nurse comes in with all this paperwork and lets me know that it's going to be about $50,000 a year.
Yes.
And that it's going to be a battle for your insurance to cover it.
About $1,000 a week.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a big number. That's a huge number.
Well, considering all the other numbers we've already gotten, yes,
right.
it's a huge number. Yeah.
And she said, you need to...
And it wasn't that it would be hard for our insurance to cover. It would be hard for us to demonstrate that they needed to cover it. Let's be honest, which is the problem everyone has with insurance.
Right.
It was really more about would they cover it?
Would they cover it?
Right.
So she explains, well, actually the PA comes in and she's explaining to me the process of this. And she was like, it's going to be several months of paperwork, and we need, all of Kaysen's labs that show that he's way below normal, that shows he's immune deficient, that shows he's been on antibiotics as much as he has, that shows he has these skin infections and these respiratory infections. But she was like, just hang in there. In the meantime, we're going to keep giving him the antibiotics because he can't stay sick.
Right.
So we're going to keep giving him the antibiotics, and I'll get back to you. Well, 3 months later, the PA calls me and says, well, it was denied, so now we have to appeal.
Right.
And I need you to do this and this and this. Again, we need more labs from Kaysen. We need all this kind of stuff. And so we go through that process. And
which I don't understand why they would deny it. I mean, 15Q25 is a common thing.
Right.
25.2.
Yeah, 25.2.
It's pretty common. I'm sure they get this request all the time.
They have no idea what that is. They don't know anything, but they've got documentation showing he has immune deficiency. So we're denied the first time. We were denied the second time.
We were denied the second time. So now how long? That was another 3 months, right? So we're at 6 months of discussing this.
And she has to now go in front of the doctor now has to go in front of
I'm just going to call it a tribunal.
Yeah. Well, the doctor, she had to go present our case to these other doctors.
Yeah. Who expressly want and need to deny it.
Right. Well, the doctor that was the one to make this decision was a podiatrist.
Yeah, it was a podiatrist, which I think if there is a better indication of where we are as a country in our healthcare system, it's that we were having a podiatrist decide whether or not our child who had a 1 in 740 million diagnosis needed immunotherapy.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
So that's extremely frustrating. That took another 3 months, but eventually insurance approved it.
Yes, 9 months.
9 months later. So we have a deductible that we have to pay, and then they would cover it. And every 6 months, the immunologist, they have to submit paperwork and to show that it's working and all that kind of stuff. So we finally get it all approved. And
now, one of the benefits here was that Kaysen traditionally met his individual deductible pretty early in the year. He'd generally meet that by, it's gotten fat. It used to take about 6 months, then it got to be about 3 months. Now with these infusions, he is meeting his deductible by mid-January.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So they set us up with the infusion company, not really us understanding exactly what it is about. We know that it's an infusion, but we didn't know how it all worked. And so they send out a nurse, and the nurse comes out, and we are informed that you and I will be learning how to do these infusions, not us going to an infusion center to get this done, not having a nurse come and do it, that you and I are now going to be doing these.
So yes, we had been under the impression that someone would come out and administer the infusions on a weekly basis. No, that's not part of the deal. They'll come out and do it the first, it
was a month.
Yeah, the first 4 times.
4 times.
And then we were going to take it over.
Right. And these infusions involve 3 needles. Now remember, Kaysen and needles don't mix.
He's gotten used to the blood test, but those needles go in his arm. These are going to go in his stomach.
Or his inner thigh.
That doesn't matter. He's never had a shot there, so those are bad.
Those are not good places to have 3 needles put in. And this isn't a quick process. How long do the infusions take?
The infusions take an hour and a half to 2 hours.
Sometimes, the other day, it was like 2:45.
Sometimes it goes a little slower. Yeah, there's no rhyme. That's a little rare. Usually
it's 2 hours.
Usually it's 2 hours. Usually on average, I'd say it's about 2 hours.
So now...
Or in my case, as I cover that, it's generally most of a Marvel movie.
Right. Now Kaysen knows, so we do infusions now every Wednesday night.
Every Wednesday we do infusions, and if there's not a Mavericks game on, we watch a Marvel movie.
But Kaysen's paralyzed when he does it, not literally, but...
He literally cannot move.
And we have to have tons of lidocaine cream, and he's got his whole ritual, how he has to sit and he can't move because he has 3 needles in his stomach.
And believe me, it's something that if you wanted to, you could play Xbox while you have these infusions in,
Right.
They're taped down, so it's not like you can't move or whatever, but
he thinks he can't.
Right. It's the same as when he gets a blood test and he wants all the gauze and stuff put on, and he has to walk around with his arms straight out because he's afraid it's going to start bursting into blood. So,
right.
He is unable to move.
Correct. So, we've kind of gotten used to that. We were a little bit, I guess, shocked at first that this is going to be a weekly thing because, I think we've mentioned before, it's hard enough for you and I to go out, just to go have dinner. We have to have someone stay with him and watch him. But now we're adding a weekly infusion, and you and I don't travel, just the 2 of us. Oh, let's go get away. That is not something we get to do. But now adding, because it's hard to leave.
It's very difficult.
And now we're adding a weekly infusion that, how do you can't just hire a babysitter to say, okay, you stay with our special needs child for a week. He takes ungodly amounts of medicine 3-4 times a day.
Yeah,
he has a BPAP. He needs this. I was kind of, and you're going to be doing infusions where you're going to be putting needles in his stomach and you have to sit here for 2.5 hours. It's just one more thing added on top of our list of a lot of things.
Yeah.
So it was frustrating for us. It was very frustrating for him. We already talked about the cost of it, that you're just like, the hits keep on coming when it comes to case and when it comes to medical stuff. But the good news is that the infusions work.
They do. They have. Yeah.
He has, I think, been on an antibiotic for a respiratory infection maybe once since we've started the infusion.
Which is now going on, 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's so much better, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say for that next year, between like 16 and 17, we noticed a huge difference in his health physically. He was much better. The neuropathy is still there. In fact, that had gotten a little bit worse. We had to increase the gabapentin. By the time he gets closer to 17, his mood seems to somewhat calm down a little bit.
Well, it's stabilized.
Yeah,
which, he's taking mood stabilizers, and that's exactly what had happened. It had more or less stabilized to where most of the time you didn't. We were no longer having to really walk on the eggshells that we had been.
Kind of like the puberty had subsided a little bit.
Which, by the way, he had no understanding of puberty.
No.
I mean, and also, it's not like he went through a girl crazy phase or anything like that. None of that ever changed. It was literally, he still to this day, he doesn't like the color pink because that's for girls.
It's girly, yeah.
Right.
Because he's a child.
Right. And he doesn't say girl. If he knew what cooties were, he would say girls had cooties still.
Yeah.
But it was the pure bodily changes that he was going through that he had no understanding of.
Right.
So as he was going through it, testosterone bursts and all that sort of stuff in conjunction with his various maladies, he was a powder keg.
Yeah.
But that had subsided.
It had subsided. His hallucinations were so much better. Like almost to the point where we were more surprised when he would see something or hear something, just because they had really, really calmed down. He was on a huge amount of medicine, but he's functioning.
And he was also like slightly more self-aware that maybe what he was seeing was a hallucination. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't immediately freaked out. He would just say something like, I just want you to know I see a shadow right now, or I see a bug right now, or I see something in the backyard. And we would say, don't worry, there's nothing back there. It's just your brain playing tricks on you. And he'd be like, okay.
Right.
Now, I'm sure it continued, but he seemed to be
so much better with that.
Dealing with it much better.
So much better with that. So then we turned 17, and when you have a special needs child that especially has an intellectual disability, you have to be thinking about what happens when they turn 18. And that entails...
Well, for everybody else, it entails, they're either going to go to college or they're going to start their life. They're moving out generally, because either they're going to college or they're getting a job or something like that, or they want to move out for sure. So that was another thing we are aware of as we're in the 17 and he's starting his senior year of high school. Certainly aware of what lied ahead, not just the difficult mental hurdles we were going to have to jump over with, again, these sort of milestones in life, but literally, when school is over, what do you do? And he wasn't in the public school system, which does extend things out another couple years if you want it to. So we were wondering what our next play was.
Right. And you have to, in our situation, and like I said, especially when you have an intellectually disabled child, you have to get guardianship. But by law, when the minute your child turns 18, they are an adult, and you as a parent have no rights. You have nothing. And when you
can't talk to doctors.
Some of Kaysen's medicines we weren't going to be able to pick up. And if you remember, I've said I live my life at the doctor's office, and I'm constantly emailing, constantly, doing stuff with doctors, and I wouldn't have been able to.
Right.
They'd be like, well, he's now 18 and we need to talk to him. Same with the insurance company. Like if we needed anything, they would have to talk to Kaysen. And so we started the process when he was about a little over 17 of getting guardianship.
Yeah, we were determined not to let that, after having, at the time we're still going through the whole, trying to get the Hizentra. So that was denied twice. So that took almost a year. We were not going to put ourselves in a position where we missed that deadline and he turned 18 and we hadn't quite pulled that off, and we're going to go through a period where no one was going to be able to take care of him.
Right. Because as we know, weird things happen with Kaysen all the time, and our luck and his luck, something bad would have happened,
right,
and it would have been a nightmare. So we started the process, which is not a quick process. You have to hire a lawyer, and lots of paperwork.
Mm-hmm. Interviews.
Of
course, they have to, a representative of the court has to talk to Kaysen, ask Kaysen, make sure that he knows what he's giving up.
Right.
Or that he doesn't really understand it, or that he understands it enough. They had to make sure. Obviously, they don't take our word for it.
Yeah, so a sheriff shows up at your house and serves Kaysen paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
And we had prepared him that this was going to happen, but the sheriff shows up at your house.
He's not in trouble.
But he was very nervous about it.
Yes.
Shows up and hands Kaysen the paperwork, and he was very nice to Kaysen. Kaysen was terrified. And then, like you said, someone from the court comes out to our house and talks to us, and then without us present, interviews Kaysen and asks him kind of just to see where he is mentally. And we could hear a little bit of it, but Kaysen was very nervous about that. And we told him, just answer the best you can. It's not, it's not a yes or no or whatever. Just do the best you can. And then that guy writes up a report for the judge to look over. We have to do another neuropsych eval because they needed one closer to his current age, closer to 18. So we had to do that. Again, it showed he's an 11.
Even though we have 3 or 4 others that are demonstrating with each passing one that there is a continuing degradation of his intelligence quotient,
right,
and that he is not demonstrating, maturing skills to be able to take care of himself.
Right.
He is stuck in time.
Exactly. And so that process, I'm trying to think how long that took. It was kind of on and off that whole year, I want to say.
Yeah, it was a measured. Well, okay. One of the interesting things was, and as I just said, we wanted to make sure we didn't miss anything and have anything happen. Well, conveniently, you cannot be declared someone's guardian until they are 18.
Right.
So we could not, his birthday is in the early part of the year. We couldn't do it a month early or a week early or a day early. We had to set up
after. Yeah.
Yes. And his birthday actually, I think, fell on a weekend. So we ended up there was actually
actually, no, you remember the court date was actually his birthday. And then there was a problem. Remember, our lawyer called us and said there was a problem with the court that day. They're pushing it to the 19th.
They pushed it out. They pushed it out 2 days.
2 days, and we were like,
"That's right. That's what it was."
We were so nervous because we're like, 2 days is an eternity with Kaysen.
Something could happen.
Something can happen in those 2 days. Thankfully, it didn't. But when you do this, you and I have a lawyer, but then Kaysen is assigned.
He has a court-appointed
lawyer.
Yeah.
That the day of his hearing, you go to the court. and she meets Kaysen for the first time.
Right.
He was so nervous because he knew he was going to have to be in front of a judge.
I think actually he was nervous that it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. Well, he just didn't know what to expect.
He just knew that he wanted us to be his guardian.
Right.
And he was concerned that it, for some reason, it wouldn't happen.
Right. And so she was there. His attorney showed up and met with him for a few minutes, and she had all the paperwork. She had the letter from the guy that came out and interviewed Kaysen and interviewed us. And then you go into the courtroom, and the judge is sitting there, and we're on our table over here, and Kaysen's at his table over there. And as a parent, it's an extremely surreal moment because, again, he's 18,
mm-hmm.
and it's so abnormal to be sitting there and hear a judge say these things, that, Kaysen's, you're taking away his rights for this and that, and you are now his legal guardians, and he's now a ward of the state. That's what they call him. So when we get the paperwork, because every year you have to renew guardianship, and it says the ward of the state. And like I said, as a parent, it's just not normal. We're supposed to be excited about him graduating high school and going to college and starting his life, when in reality, it's just like part of his life is ending. It feels kind of like, because you're just like, his rights are being taken away. They need to be taken away. It's not that I'm saying they don't.
Yeah. Again, it's just that for us, it was that reinforcement of, here's another milestone in life that is not being celebrated the way that everyone else gets to celebrate. It's one of the few things, when you turn 16 and you can get a driver's license, not everybody gets their own car. Not everybody, that's an economic thing, but everybody gets to experience turning 18, becoming an adult, having, whether it's new responsibilities you're afraid of or not, no matter what you're going to do, everyone gets to experience becoming an adult. And Kaysen didn't really care to, really. It wasn't something that was important to him, and we didn't get to experience it either.
The guardianship, now Kaysen's paranoid about it because we go any doctor, and at the time we're still seeing all of his pediatric doctors, but the very first appointment we go to after he turns 18, they ask me, or they say, I can't speak with you, I need to speak with Kaysen.
Right. Even though we've told them, even though we've sent the papers over.
And I have the guardianship papers with me, and I'm like, no, I'm his guardian. And they're like, oh, okay. And some people understand it, some people don't. But it makes Kaysen very stressed out because there have been several times where doctors, nurses, whatever, won't talk to me. They'll talk to him, and I have to remind them that I'm his, just because he's no different today than he was 6 months ago when he was here. Just because he's a legal adult does not mean he's all of a sudden cured of his autism and his intellectual disability. It's still there. So he, to this day, still gets stressed out anytime we go to do you have the guardianship papers?
Yeah, and I think that's because he now has a better understanding of what those papers represent.
Right.
And Kaysen always needs something to worry about. Right. He always needs something to worry about. So that's one of the things that he can be concerned about. And it is, it always is, even though we have been his legal guardian now for several, this will be our 5th year as his legal guardian, we still have to deal with, no matter how often we send the papers in or how long the papers have been there, if the doctor's staff turns over and, we're getting ready to go in for a regular appointment or whatever, they are still saying, I need to speak with Kaysen. And we're like, no, you don't. We have legal guardianship. I don't know if it's in your files. Go find it. It's there. We update it every year. So, and I guess that's the other thing is that guardianship there's another bit of a burden there because, as we have shown, as we know from the neuropsych evals, his conditions are not changing. They are staying the same. His physical health moves around, but his his ability to function as an adult is not improving.
Right.
Yet we have to reapply every year, and
we have to fill in that
we have to update the county on what's happened in the last year. Yeah.
What any new diagnosis is, what medicines is he taking? I mean, how many times did he see psychiatrist? I mean, it's a big thing. And if you know, Kaysen, I think last year, he had 70 or 80 doctor's appointments. And so we have to document.
Go with 70 to 80.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have to document all of that. And we have to tell them the name of the doctor, the number of the doctor. I mean, it's just more work for us as special needs parents. Okay. So we get the guardianship. That was February of his senior year.
Mm-hmm.
And
February of the COVID-19 year. So yep.
We're all home, and that's a nightmare in itself because, again, when you have autism, you're very structured, and he's used to getting up at a certain time. He's used to going to his school, doing this and that. And when I'm having to teach him, I mean, that's just a whole nother.
And, it's not that the pandemic wasn't stressful for everybody, but just imagine what it's like for us being cooped up in a house where we can't go anywhere.
We don't get a break from him. It's hard. It was very hard.
It was hard.
So shortly thereafter, the skin infections and stuff had gotten so much better until one day he said, Daddy, I have a bump on my leg.
I have a bump on my leg up in his groin area, which that's always
right. Fun. And you go and look at it, and
so I'm, because initially I'm thinking he has a tendency to he's overly worried about things, so it's probably just a pimple or something
little, like nothing major.
It was.
I
mean, it looked. I would have only described it as a boil.
I've never seen anything like
that. Yeah, it was giant.
And it had, it was.
And it looked swollen. I mean, it looked like either it was a boil or it looked like a brown recluse spider bite. I mean, it was
the craziest thing I've
giant.
Ever seen.
Had a big head on it. I mean, it was like, whoa, we better go to the ER.
And of course, it's a Friday.
Well, of course, it's a Friday. It's always a Friday when we run into these things. Now, Kaysen had some other weird things that had happened. He had gotten some, over the years, over the kind of 3 or 4 years that led up to this, he'd gotten some weird blisters on his feet from sunburn. And so we'd kind of developed a relationship with this sort of,
urgent
care facility. Yeah. Right.
They knew him.
They know him. Yeah. And we were lucky enough that we had done some research, and insurance actually did cover it because those can be a problem. But so we had kind of developed a relationship. So I took him over there, and they had never seen anything like that. They freaked out, and they freaked me out because the first thing they thought was that he might have a staph infection. Mm-hmm. Which I thought, oh God, that's all we need is a staph infection.
Because he had red marks going down his leg.
Yeah. So they, they lanced it, they cleaned it, packed it with, they were putting him on some antibiotics, some very, very serious antibiotics. And they were very concerned that we keep an eye on it. And we were cleaning it, and it was an open wound.
Yeah, it was.
And we got through that, but then he had another one. Now we saw it kind of before it got to be that big,
but it was starting.
Yeah,
we were like, this is.
So we need to, instead of just continuing to go, I guess at that point we knew it probably isn't a staph infection, because if it was a staph infection, something very serious would have happened.
Yeah.
But.
So, we make
it didn't look good.
No. So I make the decision, okay, well, now we need to see a dermatologist because this is weird.
So let's add a dermatologist to the team.
So we go to the dermatologist, and I think we mentioned last episode that his nails had gotten, all of his nails, especially his toenails, very, very thick, thick, like just weird. And his hands and his feet are so dry, like cracking dry, and no matter how much lotion you put on, nothing fixes it. Take him to the dermatologist, and she looks at his hands and his nails and looks at his feet. And I show her pictures of the...
Did she go, huh?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
I showed her pictures of the skin infections and stuff like that. And she was like, well, he has 2 different skin conditions. One is it's called keratoderma.
Keratoderma.
Which is the...
Keratodermatitis?
No, just
keratoderma. Okay.
Keratoderma. And that's the one it's causing the dryness, hands and feet, and the nails. There's nothing you can do for it.
That's just something else he's got.
She did tell about a special kind of lotion and stuff, but he just has to live with it. The skin infections is actually a skin disease called hidradenitis suppurativa.
Yeah, that's the one that had the itis. Say it again.
Hidradenitis suppurativa.
There you go.
And they call it HS for short.
I would too.
And it's a skin disease. And I said,
it turns out it's not even really that serious.
It's not, but what it is they call them, it's kind of tumor-like is what they, and you can get them all over, but a lot of times like under your arms and your groin, but they are big and they scar, which his do.
They do.
They're very painful. They kind of keep happening in the same area, and so your skin just gets kind of cratered. There's no cure for it.
No. But it's not life-threatening.
It's not life-threatening.
And it's not a staph infection.
And they have no idea if this is related to the 15Q, if this is something even more random. His geneticist has no idea.
Yeah.
So the treatment for it is an antibiotic cream that he has to put on his groin area or wherever he gets one of these bumps twice daily. And we just kind of monitor it. If that eventually stops working, then there's some other medicines that we don't really want him to have to go on because he's already immune deficient.
Right.
But right now we're going to just kind of knock on some wood because the antibiotic cream is working. And we know that when one pops up, we have to put just extra cream on. But yet again...
And he does that himself.
And he does do that himself. He kind of knows now what they feel like.
He knows where he has got that figured out.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we have added 2 more. 3 more if you include the immune deficiency. In these 2 years, we've kind of, and at this point, you kind of want to throw your hands up and be like, what else is there going to be? Because every time you think we have a general idea of what's going on with Kaysen, something else.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Since he got on that Hizentra, he's the one member of our family who never got COVID.
He didn't. Well, because we didn't really say what the Hizentra is. It's human plasma. That's why it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And basically, they take people's healthy immune systems and give it to Kaysen.
Right.
And when COVID...
So literally on a weekly basis, in theory, that Hizentra is more powerful than the last dose was because it's got whatever the latest...
Right. So there's
stuff is
natural COVID antibodies in that plasma. And so he's kind of double protected, which is good. But yeah, he's, knock on wood, I keep saying that, but he's been very...
I don't know why you keep saying that.
I don't either. Just it feels like at least it just kind of makes me think I have some sort of control of what's next in Kaysen's life. But I want to know we don't have control.
Well, and it doesn't appear to be doing anything.
No. Okay, so we come up, we're getting close to him graduating. Basically, he's not, he has not taken typical academic classes or whatever, but he's done with high school, and we are having to figure out what are we going to do next.
Well, he's done with school.
Yeah, he's made that very clear.
Yeah, he has made that very clear.
And there's just not a lot of options out there for after 18. Like you said, in the public school, you can go a couple more years. Part of their special ed program, but there's just not a lot out there.
The world's just not really built for this population.
No, especially adults. It's like, they're in school. They'll get the services when they're in school, but once they're done in the school system, you're kind of thrown out there just to figure it out on your own. There's just not a lot of help. And I knew, and you knew, that it was not an option for Kaysen to be at home with me every day, all day, to entertain him.
Right.
I would have gone insane.
He would have.
Because he demands your attention all the time.
Summers were
torture.
Well, they were the best indicator of what life would be like if we didn't do something. And so, yeah, we knew early on that we had to figure something out, because that wasn't going to be plausible.
Right. And thankfully, we had heard of an organization here locally called My Possibilities that is for adults with special needs and intellectual.
It's a day program for adults with special needs.
Right. So we made the decision to go tour it first with Kaysen, and
again, he's not eligible for My Possibilities until he is 18 years old.
Right. It's not like you can apply when he's 16, because there's a wait list at the time.
There's a wait list because there's a lot of demand in North Texas for these types of services.
So you have to wait until he is 18.
And Kaysen did turn 18 during his senior year, so he would have been eligible to go, after he graduated in May. But of course, we had a pandemic, so he did not go.
Right. He did not go.
Right.
So he was put on a wait list because there was a wait list with COVID and stuff.
Well, there was a wait list prior to COVID.
Prior to COVID, too. But so we were just kind of in limbo a little bit, knowing that school's ending, and when is he going to be able to go to this day program, so he's not staying home all day with me. And then that raises another issue of the cost of this day program.
Yeah.
Like I had said before, public school's free and their services are free, but after that, it's on the parent, unless you are lucky enough to have qualified to be on a state waiver, and we'll get into that in a whole nother podcast. Right. But these state waivers in the state of Texas, the wait is like 20 some little bit longer years.
Well, Texas ranks last in the country in taking care of this population.
Yes. And so we were on a list until he was about 13, and he got kicked off.
Yeah, we don't know why.
But
and we didn't find out for like a year after that.
Yeah. We were like, why didn't we get the information? And they're like, oh, you never responded. And we're like, we haven't gotten anything. It was a big battle back and forth. So at this point, Kaysen's 13. We made the choice. What's the point of putting him on a waiver now when he'll be 35 or whatever when he qualifies? So that burden falls on us to pay for this day program, which is, it's a hefty thing to pay for.
Next episode, we're going to talk about, more in depth about what that day program has represented, and how he got into the program. But
and partly too because we didn't know, because Kaysen has schizophrenia and bipolar, and he has aggression history and things like that, and a lot of places are hesitant to accept him based on his diagnosis.
Programs are equipped to deal with people with limited diagnoses, much more so than they are others.
Especially mental health.
Right.
You throw that in there and people get scared. And so we were nervous about how My Possibilities would accept him and how he would do there and all that kind of stuff.
And that's even, his, as we said, the medicinal cocktail he had been on had really leveled him out.
Yeah.
I would definitely say, and I would say now, that it's been years since I think Kaysen could be construed as being a danger to himself or anyone else. But, that doesn't always matter when you're talking about filling out your paperwork to be considered for a program, and you got to put those words on the paper.
Right.
They understandably they have to be concerned about their own legal protection, but it
Still
really limits your options.
So he's up to 18. He's now a legal adult, and we're trying to hopefully figure out next steps. It's going to be at my possibilities, and kind of you and I make a realization of
another realization
where we had, like we said, when you have kids, you plan for their future by, starting 529s or their college account or things like that. And it just kind of hit us one day that we were like, let's figure out what Kaysen has cost us. Because like I said, we've had insurance, but so much of Kaysen's issues have not been covered by insurance.
And the collateral expenses that come from caring for Kaysen are also not covered by insurance.
No.
The day program is not covered by insurance.
And just anything, like anytime he's been like hospitalized and things like that, I mean, it just compounds over time.
Yep.
So we sat down and figured out that we have spent
$50,000 for this, $26,000 for that, all those things. You just, you do what you have to do. You scrape things together to make things work. And my whole thinking was, as long as I don't think about it, I can kind of just keep on trucking. But the reality is that probably conservatively, on average, we have been managing a $100,000 budget just to take care of Kaysen on an annual basis.
So for 18 years.
Well, he's 23 now.
Right. But up
until then, we had probably conservatively spent around $1.8 million on his care.
To care for Kaysen.
Yeah.
And that was shocking because, like we have said before, we have been fortunate to be able to care for Kaysen the way we have.
So aware of how blessed we have been.
And it's I think the biggest thing is that it really broke our hearts because if we're having to pay this.
Well, that's what I was going to get to.
Yeah.
Is that we have been blessed through whatever you want to call it, hard work, answered prayers, blessings. I mean, all of those things. But we are, and we have rather extreme circumstances with us, but we talk to and hear from people all the time that have, especially in the case where there aren't two active parents, there aren't two incomes, they can't hold down a job because of their situation, even if it's less serious.
Or their insurance is too much.
Yeah, their insurance, they can't afford insurance.
And then they can't pay for their medicines. And
I think it's probably worse in Texas because there are fewer programs in this state for this population than in every other state in the United States. So it definitely is sobering to take into consideration all the people out there that are struggling to pay these expenses and try and provide the best care that they can.
Because our expenses with Kaysen don't change.
In fact, they just go up a little bit.
Yeah, they go up, and that's something that we will have to pay for. And we'll get into this later, but when they turn 18 or anytime after 18, you can apply for Social Security, and we'll get into that later. But we're still fighting that. It's frustrating because this is an example of the state we live in and the lack of help for families. But like I said, that's a whole nother episode and a whole nother situation.
Right.
But up to this point, Kaysen's a legal adult, and
we're legal guardians.
And we're legal guardians.
And we're almost caught up. So to where everyone knows everything that we put it all out there, and then we should be able to start talking about some rather specific things and how our experiences can benefit other people. So right. We'll leave it there as we finish up the incredible 16 to 18 plus area of his life. And we'll pick up that story next week. I'm Jeff.
I'm Kim.
And this has been Specialness. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.